Welcome. Welcome from Sananda. The theme or the subject of today's talk is angels in your life. Let's begin with the past, the received sense, and indeed the experience shared by many of angelic presence. Your own direct experience or the stories you've encountered will often be of individual, illuminated, wondrous beings making an appearance to announce or to help in a crisis. So often their appearance has been associated with special times, pivot points in a sense, whether in the life of humanity as a whole or in the life of an individual. It's as if that experience of crisis, and I mean crisis in the broad sense of, as I've just called it, a pivot point, a kind of hinge, a corner, a turning in life. It's as if that experience of crisis gives angelic beings a kind of permission to intervene, to enter into the human world, to allow their presence to be experienced directly. It may well be that such experiences continue to be part of human life. For some beings, maybe for many beings on particular occasions. But one reason for talking about this today is there's also a change happening. A change that's sometimes referred to as the thinning of the veils. And in the context of angels in your life, this can be understood to mean that in some ways it is easier or natural for angelic energies to be present in your awareness. So there's a two-way shift. A shift in the conditions in which you live, but a shift within yourselves as well. This two-aspected shift is really just one shift. When you change, the world changes. We might suggest that another way of understanding the change is that as you waken more and more to more of who and what you are, so the need for allowing a dramatic intervention in your lives recedes. The nature of the relationship changes. I'll be talking some more about that soon. But before that, I'd like to say more about the relationship of angelic beings to your world. In some ways, you can understand your world as being held in angelic hands. That's a symbolic language, of course. But if we consider the reality in which you live as being, in some sense, a created reality, then we may understand that creation in many different ways. The simplest and most useful at this point is to think in terms of co-creation. But at one level, you and everyone else who constitutes the human race, and then beyond that, all living beings on Earth and then beyond, contribute to creating whatever shared reality you do share. but you also find yourself within the reality that at some level you yourselves are creating. And that then opens up another very valuable role that broadly we can say is performed by angelic beings. While you dive into the reality you've created, the angels hold it in place for you so that you can live the experience of being within a reality, and to some extent at least, and at least for a while, ignore the fact that actually you created it. This is not a product of ignorance or stupidity on your part. If there is an ignorance, it's a deliberate ignorance. It is simply that you have chosen as beings to focus upon, for all that this is a vast world, wonderfully complex, in many senses miraculous. Nevertheless, you've chosen to focus upon what is actually a tiny portion of all that is possible. A brief snapshot that you're exploring, as indeed someone might explore a photograph, looking at it, so to speak, with a magnifying glass, finding out the detail of it, becoming so absorbed by it that you enter into it. And at that point, that angelic role becomes not just useful, but in some senses necessary. It grants you permission to enter the reality you've created, to identify with it, not as creator, but as participant. It's not a permanent state. There's a process, a journey here. As you come to appreciate that which you've created, all of its intricacies, all of its complexity, all of the confusion, the uncertainty, as well as the certainties, as you embrace that more and more, you come to appreciate that the distinction that there seemed to be between you experiencing a reality and the reality you're experiencing is actually fundamentally illusion, that you and the reality are one. At that point, you give the angelic beings who are assisting you by holding this reality in place permission to let go, because you've taken on the responsibility. It's an ongoing process. If we look at this in terms of chronological Earth time, then there's quite some way to go with this exploration. But from time to time, and this is one of those times, there are marked shifts in how you collectively, and many of you individually, experience reality, experience your relationship with reality. So there is then a shift happening round about this time. There's no urgency, it takes its own time. It changes for each of you individually at the pace that is right for you, whereby there is less requirement, so to speak, for angelic intervention as powerful, individual, very beautiful presences of light, stepping into the world in moments of crisis, those decision points, whether those are collective decisions or individual decisions, that begins to fade out. It's not quite required in the same way that it was. And instead, and it's this that we draw your attention to, there can be a different sense. I say instead, but it can be as well as a different sense of angelic presence. That there can be a sense that angelic light, angelic love, angelic presence, rather than holding this reality in their hands in the way that I first suggested, is actually permeating the reality. That there is no place in your lived experience of this reality no place within the reality as it's constituted in which there is not angelic energy present. At this time, it is easier for you to detect under certain conditions than others, but it is everywhere. And so part of the way in which you are changing, opening yourselves to change, is to develop your subtle senses, your ability to feel that angelic presence, not as a condensed light that becomes individual presence, but as a permeating, ubiquitous light that is everywhere. And by everywhere, we also mean within you as well as around you. If you look within, and this may not be immediately evident because it takes a degree of practice, whatever your experience, no need to judge it. You're growing, and you grow in the ways that are most relevant and important to you. And the way that I'm talking about, at least in this particular context, may not be at the forefront of your growing. In general, an opening up of your subtle senses, yes, that is part of growing for all of you. But it happens in different ways. And I'm focusing on one particular aspect of the energy of all that is. By its nature, angelic energy is very high frequency. It's extremely harmonious. It is, if you like, a condition of being an angel, that your energies are at a very high level of harmony indeed. Another way of expressing that is to say that as an angelic being, you give over readily and entirely your will to the divine, to source. There is no sense of a need to manufacture a separate identity from source. There is the appreciation that there's really no greater joy to be found than that total absorption into the body, if we put it this way, of the source of all. And so because angelic energies have this very high frequency, which is itself a mark of a very high level of harmony, it's not always easy to discern. It is the nature of existing in a human form that your senses are attuned to change rather than continuity. The things that are always with you, in some ways, are the least easy to notice. As creatures living in a physical world, you have behind you many, many, many years of evolution, in which part of how evolution happened was a honing of alertness. Your ancestors, and indeed yourselves to some extent, find yourselves living in, as they found themselves living in, an uncertain environment, and therefore being alert to change is a very good survival strategy, and it's alive and well in you. So that part of the skill of developing that ability to sense the permeating presence of angels is learning to not ignore or abandon that ability to perceive change. It continues to be extremely useful to you. But open up the spectrum of observation, the range of observation, so that you notice that which doesn't change, and find that not just something that you notice, but that enriches you. This relates to, if we speak in terms of spiritual growth or meditation, the notion of stillness, the movement from the busyness of activity to an inner stillness. For it is there that it is easiest to sense that permeating angelic presence. You begin, as it were, to hear the angels. But compared to the hubbub of a changing world, that voice is quiet. It is extremely, we might even say infinitely beautiful. For the purpose of angelic song is to direct you to the infinity of oneness. But for all that it is beautiful, it is quiet for the human ear. It's there, even at the level of physical sound, but that takes considerable skill. Certainly don't criticize yourself if it's not evident to you through your physical senses. But your inner senses, trust those. Imagination can help to a considerable degree. It doesn't take you all the way, but allowing the imagination to help you to notice what you haven't quite noticed before does open doors. So we're speaking then of a shift in human experience, where for more and more of you, there can be a sense of the fabric of all that is, including the fabric of you, being permeated with angelic presence. As you find yourself appreciating that, experiencing it, even just a little, your sense of the being you are changes. It becomes easier to sense the oneness that you have with all life. The emphasis upon individuality becomes quieter, we might say. You continue to be an individual being, each one of you is. Each one of you brings unique gifts with your presence here on earth. So this is not about abandoning your individuality, simply not needing to use it as a marker to establish your sense of worth. As you come to appreciate this permeation of angelic light, angelic love, through the very fabric of your being, the need to prove yourself in the old ways falls by the wayside. Again, let me emphasize, this does not mean that you cease to contribute to the world. For some, it might be indeed that this acknowledgement of angelic energy permeating your presence does bring a shift to a life of contemplation, a life of stillness, a life of retreat from the world. These things are possible. But if it is that way for an individual, it will be because it is valuable, not just for them as an individual, but for all the world to follow that path. In most cases, our sense, our understanding, our expectation is that as more and more people open to the sense of the continuous presence of angelic love and light throughout their being, throughout their world, then that feeds into the choices that they make. They continue to be active in the world, continue in all probability to be using the skills they've already established, but allowing that sense of the perfection of all that is to guide their choices. It can be very hard at this time, at the human level, to believe with any depth of belief that the world is perfect as it is. It can feel like a complete denial of the obvious. You don't have to look very far to find suffering in the world. And it touches your heart. You long to alleviate suffering, even to banish it from the world. And it generates a mental conflict and an emotional conflict as well. When you're also presented or are presenting yourself with the notion that actually everything is perfect as it is. If you experience this kind of conflict within yourself, a way of healing that conflict that you might like to consider and explore is to appreciate that everything you reject, everything that you hate, everything that distresses you, you tend, at least to some degree, to add energy to through your detestation, your distress. And that if, without faking it, you're able to move to a sense of the perfection of all, you change your relationship with that which has previously been deeply distressing to you. You don't cease to care. It's rather that the care becomes, shall we say, more and more angelic. That more of your angelic self, more of your divine self becomes present. It's not that you shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, everything's perfect as it is, I don't need to do anything. It is rather that with that sense, that growing sense of being permeated with angelic harmonies, it enables you to find within yourself more easily a space of divine compassion, which is very powerful. You might say that the presence of God comes into the world through you and as you. Or if there is an awkwardness about that kind of language, that the more you find oneness with all others, the more you bring harmony into the world. And therefore finding a oneness with those whom you find it difficult or have found difficult to love or agree with is part of a contribution to creating a world of greater harmony. So, and here's another way of considering this, in a sense, greater angelic presence in your lives. And that is that you are being tuned as a musical instrument might be tuned. That in some sense the angelic notes are like a tuning fork. That you're learning as you listen to or listen for that angelic voice, to allow yourself more and more to move into resonance with that tuning fork, to begin to vibrate more and more to that angelic song. Again, let me emphasize that this is a process. From our perspective, it doesn't matter if it takes hundreds of years, thousands of years, even millions of years. It's the direction of travel that is of interest to us. Also consider, and this is one of the reasons why I spoke of millions of years just now, that the journey to complete resonance with angelic beings is a very considerable journey. Even angels are evolving. And as you begin to feel or hear or sense their music, you're assisting that evolution. You're not fallen beings because you are not angels. You're not disgraced. This is an idea that you collectively as humans have formed as part of your current reality. But it has no fundamental truth. All the forgiveness that you might believe you need comes from within you, not from somewhere else. And so, yes, to lift to those angelic vibrations is indeed a journey. but not because you are so low that it can feel like an impossible climb. No, you're just exploring a particular mode of being that is of value for all life in all dimensions. All you're doing, all the angels are doing, is discovering more of what life is. You're doing it one way, the angels do it in another way. They are helping you, but as I've suggested, you're also helping them. Take a few moments as we draw to a close for this talk. And let your imagination help. And feel a little bit as we transmit for you some of those very beautiful angelic energies. They're not out of reach. They're simple. They're very beautiful. They're with you. If you don't sense them or feel that you don't sense them, that's okay. Do not criticize yourself or judge yourself. Imagine it as a little like tuning into a particular radio station, and you scan the bandwidth available to you. And the angelic bandwidth is perhaps just a little bit beyond where you're used to tuning. So be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to know that you are loved beyond all measure. Difficult to feel that angelic presence if you see yourself as in some ways a disgrace or inadequate or whatever the self-criticism might be. Let go of that. Consider yourself perfect as you are. Good. Thank you for listening. Go well.